Step out of the car, now. The voice hit like a gunshot, cutting through morning silence. Ethan Parker froze, both hands still on the steering wheel. The sunlight flashed against the rearview mirror, splitting into shards across his face. The man in uniform stood just outside the window, one hand resting on his belt, the other gripping a ticket pad like a weapon. "Sir?" Ethan said calmly. "Did I do something wrong?" Officer Blake's sunglasses reflected him perfectly. The suit, the car, the calm expression. "You were driving fast in a borrowed car. That's what's wrong," the officer said. "License and registration." Ethan's brows knitted. "Borrowed?" "Yeah, borrowed. A car like this doesn't exactly match the type." A truck thundered by, shaking the side mirror. The world went back to quiet. Only the steady ticking of Ethan's dashboard clock broke the silence. Ethan opened the glove box slowly. "I'm not borrowing it, officer. It's mine." He laughed, short, dry, like gravel scraping metal. "Sure it is." He grabbed the documents the moment Ethan held them out, flipping through them too quickly to read. His face hardened. "Step out." Ethan's heart thudded once, not from fear, but disbelief. He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped into the glare of the morning sun. The highway stretched empty in both directions. Wind pressed against his suit jacket. Behind him, the Mercedes gleamed under the golden light, flawless, confident, expensive. Blake circled the car slowly, scribbling something on his pad. "Mind telling me what you do for a living, Mr. Parker?" "CEO." "Of what?" "Parker Motors." The pen stopped mid-scratch. Blake looked up. "You said Parker Motors?" "Yes. You've probably seen our cars before." The cop stared at the logo on the hood, then back at Ethan. The nameplate matched perfectly. Parker Motors AMG Series. Blake swallowed. That's your company?" Ethan's phone buzzed. He took it out, ignoring the officer's confusion. "Excuse me," he said, answering. "Tell them I'll be 5 minutes late. I got pulled over by someone who doesn't read badges carefully." He hung up before the reply came. Blake lowered his pad. "Sir, look, it's just standard procedure." "Standard," Ethan interrupted, "doesn't mean suspicion before fact." The air thickened. For a moment, neither moved. A few cars slowed as they passed, watching the standoff in their mirrors. Blake's face twitched. His confidence was cracking under the quiet. Ethan took a step closer, not aggressive, just certain. "Do you know what today is, officer?" "No." "The day Parker Motors finalizes its partnership with the city's police department for new patrol vehicles." The realization hit like a siren. Blake blinked twice, trying to keep his tone level. That's got nothing to do with..." "Actually, it has everything to do with it," Ethan said. "You just stopped the man who signs the contract for your department's next fleet." Silence. Only the hum of the cruiser's idling engine and the wind over asphalt. Ethan slid his ID back into his wallet. "Next time you pull someone over, officer, start with respect. It's easier to maintain than to rebuild." He turned toward his car. Behind him, Blake exhaled shakily, lowering his sunglasses. "Sir, you're free to go." He stopped halfway, glancing back. "I know," he said quietly, and got in. The Mercedes purred to life, smooth and powerful. As he drove off, the sunlight caught the company logo again, burning bright against the chrome. In the mirror, Officer Blake's reflection stood small, one hand shading his eyes, the other holding a useless ticket pad. Ethan pressed the accelerator, the highway opening wide before him. The radio crackled on just in time for a news alert. City Police Department expected to announce its new vehicle deal later today with Parker Motors CEO Ethan Parker. Ethan smiled, Timing couldn't have been better. The glass doors of Parker Motors headquarters slid open with a soft hiss as Ethan stepped through. His assistant jogged beside him, tablet in hand. "The police procurement team's already here," she said. "You're 5 minutes early, sir." "Good," Ethan replied. "Let's not keep them waiting." Inside the boardroom, sunlight spilled across a long oak table where 3 uniformed officers stood with folders labeled Fleet Renewal Proposal. At the head sat a broad-shouldered man with graying hair, the police chief. Ethan shook his hand. "Mr. Parker," the chief said warmly, "we appreciate your partnership. We've heard great things about your new patrol vehicles." Ethan smiled faintly. "They handle pressure well." A knock came at the door. The secretary poked her head in. "Chief, your logistics representative just arrived." When the door opened, the room seemed to lose its air. Officer Blake stepped inside, clipboard pressed tight against his chest. His eyes met Ethan's and stopped cold. The chief looked between them. "You two know each other?" Ethan kept his voice even. "We met briefly this morning." Blake's face flushed. "Sir, Mr. Parker, I didn't realize." Ethan gestured to a seat. "Please, let's continue." The chief began the presentation, outlining safety metrics, mileage statistics, budget allocations. Ethan listened, expression calm, but every few seconds, Blake's hands fidgeted, pen tapping nervously against the table. When the chief finished, he asked, "Any questions before we finalize?" Ethan leaned forward. "Just one." He looked directly at Blake. "How do your officers handle assumptions on duty? Are they trained to verify before they act?" The chief blinked. "Of course. Why do you ask?" Ethan smiled politely. "Because I believe one of them could use a refresher course." The chief's gaze shifted to Blake. "What's this about?" Blake opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched. Ethan slid a small dash cam device across the table. "This morning's drive was recorded. It's already synced to our cloud system, standard in all Parker test vehicles. You might find it educational." The chief's jaw tightened. "Officer Blake, wait outside." Blake stood, nodded stiffly, and left. The door shut with a soft click. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I'm not here for revenge, Chief, but if you're going to drive my cars, I need to know your people can respect the citizens they stop." The chief nodded. "You'll have my word and a disciplinary review." "Good," Ethan said. "Then we can sign." They shook hands. Cameras flashed from the PR team waiting outside the glass. The contract was done. An hour later, Ethan stepped out into the sunlight. The same Mercedes waited at the curb, gleaming beneath the noon sky. Officer Blake stood beside it, hat in his hands. "Sir," Blake said quietly, "I was wrong. I judged what I didn't understand. It won't happen again." Ethan studied him for a long moment. Then, "Prove it. Next time you stop someone, see the person before the profile." Blake nodded. "Yes, sir." Ethan opened the car door, paused, and looked back. "You were right about one thing this morning. It is a nice car." A small, reluctant smile tugged at Blake's mouth. "Drive smoother than any cruiser we've got." Ethan got in, engine purring to life. "You'll be getting new ones soon." He pulled into traffic, leaving the officers standing in the glare of afternoon light, badge heavy, mind heavier. The highway stretched ahead, clean and endless, the same road as before, but with a different kind of silence. Ethan turned the radio up, and for the first time that day, he didn't feel like explaining himself to anyone.
The clip hit the internet before sunset. A 38-second dash cam segment from a Parker Motors test vehicle. A calm man in a suit, a tense officer leaning into the window, and a single line that froze viewers mid-scroll. "You just pulled over the man who signs your department's next car deal." By nightfall, it had 500,000 views. By morning, 3 news channels were looping it with captions like, "Highway Stop Sparks Ethics Review." Ethan arrived at the office early. Security cameras outside the building already showed a small crowd. Reporters, a few activists, a couple of off-duty officers with folded arms. He'd expected noise. He hadn't expected how fast it would echo. Inside, his assistant looked pale. They're calling it Fleetgate on social, she said. Ethan exhaled. Let them. Truth has better mileage. He headed straight for the boardroom. Vargas, the PR director, had 3 phones on the table and 1 coffee gone cold. Damage control? He asked. Half the city thinks you leaked it yourself. The other half thinks we covered it up. Either way, we're viral. Good. That means people are watching. At 10 a.m., the police chief called. His tone was careful, measured. Mr. Parker, I won't pretend this isn't bad. The mayor's demanding a review of our traffic stop procedures. You've embarrassed us. Ethan kept his voice even. No, Chief. Your officer's behavior embarrassed you. My camera just had a better view. The chief sighed. We're suspending Blake pending evaluation. I'd like to issue a joint statement, show cooperation. Ethan considered. Only if it's honest. I'm not standing beside another apology that hides behind protocol. You're asking me to let a civilian dictate internal reform. I'm asking you to remember you serve the same public that buys my cars. A long pause. Then, we'll have your cooperation. By afternoon, every network wanted a soundbite. Ethan finally agreed to one interview, live, minimal editing. The studio lights were hotter than he remembered. The anchor leaned forward. Mr. Parker, people are calling you a hero for standing up to power abuse. Others say you're exploiting a viral moment for marketing. Which is it? Ethan looked straight into the lens. If accountability becomes a trend, I hope it never goes out of style. This isn't about me, it's about respect. Whether you wear a badge or a tie, you don't earn dignity by taking it from someone else. The control room went quiet. The clip hit social feeds within minutes. That evening, Officer Blake sat alone in his small apartment, TV volume low. His own face flashed across the screen, frozen mid-frame, one hand on a car window, mouth half open. He muted the sound and rubbed his eyes. A text buzzed on his phone. Unknown number. You can fix this. Come to the Parker Motors Training Center tomorrow, 8 a.m. E.P. Blake stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering above delete, then finally typed back one word. Okay. Morning sunlight spilled over the Parker test track. Dozens of recruits stood around a silver prototype cruiser. Ethan waited by the hood, clipboard in hand. When Blake arrived, everyone fell silent. Ethan nodded toward the group. Today's session isn't about engines. It's about reaction time up here. He tapped his temple. You see the uniform first or the human first. That decision determines whether the brakes or the heart fail first. The trainees shifted uncomfortably. Blake looked at the ground. Ethan continued. Blake has volunteered to help us correct what went wrong. He'll be assisting in designing the new ethics awareness simulator. Real decisions, real pressure. A murmur moved through the crowd. Blake swallowed hard, stepped forward. I made a mistake that could have cost more than my job. I can't erase it, but I can help make sure none of you repeat it. The words were raw, stripped from pride. For a moment, even the engine seemed to hold their breath. Ethan nodded once. Then let's start. By noon, the training video from that session was trending under a new tag. #DriveWithRespect. Parker Motors stock climbed 2%, and the police department quietly adopted the simulator program as mandatory. Later, when Ethan stood alone on the test track watching the recruits drive through drills, Blake approached. Thank you, he said. Ethan didn't look away from the cars weaving through cones. You thanked me this morning. Just keep learning. Blake hesitated. You really think people can change? Ethan smiled faintly. Engines can. Why not people? The wind carried the hum of tires across the asphalt. Smooth, controlled, almost musical. The noise that once was confrontation was now motion, forward and fast. 6 months later, the Parker Motors test track looked different. New hangar-style classrooms had risen where empty asphalt used to bake under the sun. Inside, holographic simulators hummed, rows of glass pods glowing blue, each labeled Decision Training Module version 2.1. A sign above the main door read, "Reaction is mechanical, respect is human." Ethan Parker walked down the aisle with a tablet in his hand. The air smelled of new electronics and coffee. Dozens of young recruits, some officers, some corporate trainees, watched a projection of a dash cam scene freeze on the wall. "All right," he said, voice steady. "Pause there. What do you see?" A recruit raised his hand. "A man pulled over for speeding?" Ethan shook his head. "No, look closer. What do you feel?" Another voice. "Tension, judgment before fact." He nodded. "Exactly. The program stops here because every decision after this moment depends on what you believe before you act." He let the silence settle before adding, "This simulation is based on a real event. The person in that car now runs this program." Murmurs rippled through the room. Out in the courtyard, media crews filmed an inauguration plaque, the Parker Blake Initiative for Better Decisions on Every Road. Blake stood beside it, uncomfortable in a plain suit instead of his uniform. He had left the force 3 months earlier, now teaching situational judgment courses across the country. When Ethan joined him, Blake offered a hesitant smile. "Never thought my worst day would end up carved in steel," he said. Ethan chuckled. "Neither did I. But sometimes that's how you build guardrails, out of the wrecks." They stood quietly as the mayor finished her speech. Camera flashes caught the two men shaking hands under the banner. That evening, long after the crowd dispersed, Ethan remained in his office overlooking the track. The sunset painted the buildings orange. A knock came at the door. Blake stepped in, holding a folder. "I finished the next module. Scenarios about bias and authority, misreads under stress. It's cleaner now. Less lecture, more experience." Ethan skimmed the pages, nodded. "You've learned fast. Had a good teacher," Blake said. Then quieter, "And a patient one." Ethan smiled. "Patience is cheaper than lawsuits." They laughed, small, genuine, the kind of laugh that leaves a room lighter. Blake glanced toward the window. "You think this will actually work? Change anything?" Ethan looked at the test track below, cars gliding through orange cones in perfect rhythm. "Maybe not everywhere, but it's a start. The first good start either of us made that day." Outside, a student finished a simulator round and stepped out grinning. His partner patted him on the shoulder. "Passed?" "Yeah," the student said. "Didn't assume, just ask first." The instructor wrote one word on his clipboard: progress. As the last light faded, Ethan shut off his tablet. The parking lot shimmered in the dusk, one black Mercedes still gleaming under the lamppost, quiet, familiar, unbothered. He whispered to himself, "The engine runs smoother when the driver learns." Then he turned out the lights, leaving the glass hallway glowing behind him like a runway into something better.